Let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for today. We thank you we can be in God's house and expect the Holy Spirit of God to minister to us. So, Father, fill this entire building with your love for the other churches and the school. Let Jesus Christ be supreme. In your holy name, amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Let me just lead in a little bit with a couple of things. So first off, leading it, a couple weeks ago, Pastor Mark was talking about a faith being a marathon, not a sprint, which I immediately started laughing because my kid, Amelia's not here yet, but she'll be here. But she rolls her eyes every time, because I say that all the time. I say, life is a marathon, not a sprint. Or soccer is a marathon, not a sprint. Like, it takes time. Anything worth doing takes time. And it's a marathon. So I'm glad she's not here yet. She'd be bearing her head. But my kids all roll their eyes when I say it, because I say it all the time. But the other thing is, I wore my special tie today, and some of you have seen it already, but if you look from there, where you guys are, you probably can't see it. And it probably just looks like dots, which is, when you see an aerial view of a big marathon, that's exactly what the crowd looks like. We all look like a bunch of dots when there's 30 and 40 and 50,000 people. So Chicago, which I just got done running, was, I think, 40,000 or something like that. So you'll have to take a look at my special running tie, because it actually has runners with numbers on their bibs and everything. Then the final thing before I get started is something that one of my running buddies, and I'll talk about running buddies as part of my teaching today, but he sent this earlier this week. You guys all know what a swear jar is? Hopefully we don't all have them, but he sent one thing, and you can't see it, but there's two jars next to each other. And if you get runners going, they like to talk, but it's almost like fishermen, I think. But so one jar is the swear jar, and there's a couple coins in it. And the other jar says, "Telling people about my running when I wasn't asked" jar. So, and that one's filled with money. So that's kind of where we're going. And hopefully I won't do too much of that today, and you'll relate to my message. So the first thing is, though, to get you warmed up, and you'll probably hear lots of little innuendos about running, and so I'm going to get you warmed up. So the one thing that everybody asks, not everybody, but a lot of people ask is, "You're running a marathon? How long is that?" So how long is a marathon?
26 miles.
Thank you. They all are 26.2 miles. So a lot of times people say, "How long is that?" And runners will roll their eyes, so don't be offended. They're all 26.2 miles. That's how long a marathon is. There's not a 10-mile marathon or a 50. They're 26.2 miles. So, does anyone know the background of where a marathon came from?
Yes.
Where?
I said, do you want to hear it?
No, do you know where it came from? You've probably heard the story. So, the legend is that an Athenian courier who in 490 BC, so it's been around a long time, ran from the site of the Battle of Marathon to Athens with the message of Nike. Victory, meaning victory. So now you know where Nike shoes come from. That's what that's from. Before promptly collapsing and dying. So the end wasn't that great, and there's not too many, that doesn't happen very often in marathons. But so now the third question is, why 26.2 miles? This one's kind of funny, kind of strange. Does anyone know the story behind that? It was in England. The London Marathon in 1908 was going to be 26 miles. I don't know why they chose 26, because all marathons were all different at that time. But after this event, it became the standard. The Queen wanted her nieces and nephews and children that were at the Windsor Castle on the lawn to be able to see the runners start. So she moved the start line 0.2 miles to the castle. So it was 26 miles, but she didn't like the starting line, so it moved to 26.2 miles. So that's why the strange number of 26.2. Okay. So now you know more than most people about the background of the marathon. Preparing for the marathon. So there's a lot of things that go into preparing for a marathon. I'm not going to spend my whole message talking to you about the marathon, but it's my lead-in to where we're going. So the most important question when you get ready for a marathon, what do you think that is? What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? So that relates to a lot of things that I'll talk about. But what do you want to accomplish? Do you want to just finish? Do you have a certain time that you want to meet? Do you want to qualify for Boston? For a lot of marathoners, qualifying for Boston is like the pinnacle for amateur runners. That is our Super Bowl. People spend their whole life running, trying to qualify for Boston. So that's the pinnacle. So depending on what you want to do, you're going to create your plan about that. But you got to have a plan. So there's lots of plans out there. There's all sorts of plans. I've run 11 now. But my last couple before Chicago was my 11th. They didn't go so well. I wasn't real happy. So I wanted to get better, and so I went back to my resources. So again, there's going to be a lot of connections here. I went back to my resources and pulled out a book called The Hanson Method. I had some other guys that had done this. I call them disciples. They're the running disciples, and they pointed me to this book. So I used this book, and Pastor Mark talked about it, and he was kind of amazed because he sent me a text after. He said, "How'd you do?" And I said, "I did 3:25:48. He said, "What are you trying to do?" I said, 3:25. So I was off by 48 seconds, which I was pretty happy with that. After almost 3.5 hours, off by 48 seconds, I was pretty happy about that. But that's because of this. I followed this new method, and I followed it as much as I could to the T of there's all sorts of stuff in here. So when you're training for a marathon, there's different kinds. There are different kinds of training plans. But they all include certain things. They all include long runs. So those are going to be like 16, 18, 20 miles. They all include medium runs called tempo runs. They all include short runs, speed work. You run a quarter mile, you run a half mile, you do repeats, you do 10 of those, 12 of those with a rest in between. A tempo run is traditionally like at your race pace, whatever you want to train for. So this is how we get, Pastor Boyd's like, "Wow, how did you get so close?" Because we run tempo runs. Tempo runs, you start out at the beginning, you run 6 miles, then 10 miles, 8 miles, and 10 miles. You get up to about, I think my last tempo run was 3 weeks of 10 miles at race pace, okay? So I've talked weeks, and I missed one thing, but typically these plans are about 4 to 5 months. They're like 18 weeks. Everything I've run has been 18 weeks. Some people throw in 20 weeks, but I've used 18 weeks. So it's like 4 months. So you don't roll out of bed and say, "I'm going to run a marathon." Especially if you're trying to finish, if that's your goal, just finish, it's different. You threw out the challenge 2 weeks ago and said, "Hey, something about me giving teaching on this and how it relates to faith." And so I'm one to take up a challenge. I've run competitively since I was in high school. So I don't run to just finish. I run to qualify for Boston. I run to meet a certain time. So I go by a different set of plans. Bill, you probably do the same thing, right? In your racing, you don't just try to finish, get the car across the finish line, right? You're trying to win the race. You're trying to get across the line on the time you want to get across. Well, I'm trying to do the same thing. Yours is way more complicated than mine, I'm sure. So there's long runs, short runs, medium runs, and you run about 5 to 6 days a week. Now, there's challenges, obviously, that come into that, and then I'll talk about that. So, some of those challenges, keep in mind as I'm getting through this, how these relate, not to running, but how do they relate to what you're trying to do? So, injuries. About 8 weeks in on my plan, we were in Cape Cod. I went out for a run, came back the next day, my knee was hurt. For the next 10 weeks, my left knee was hurting. I struggled through this. I had to modify things. I had to change things. I had to get over those challenges. Weather's always a blast. When you're training for Boston, it's in the spring. So now you're starting, people that are training for Boston right now, they're starting their training now. The weather hasn't been too bad, but it's about to get bad. And it's not fun training through the winter. It's also not fun training in 85-degree weather for a fall marathon. So you have your challenges. You have weather challenges. You have personal and family commitment issues. You have career things, job trips, things that I have to travel to that now you have to move your schedule around. But without a plan, you're just going with the flow. So the key is you got to have a plan. Okay, so you start that plan and you try to live by that plan as much as possible. Finally, the last thing is run your race. You've now done 18 weeks of work. You're ready for your race. One of the key things, and I've done this, and I've learned from it, don't do anything different on race day. Practice through the 18 weeks what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat. See these things? These are really gooey, gross things called gels. They try to put flavors to them. Some are chocolate, some are not too bad. This one's lemon, this one's cherry lemon. I'll go to a race. Now, I use this brand, Goo. I'll go to a race in Chicago, and they said, well, at mile 8, we're going to have gels. Well, what brand? Because if it's not the brand I've been using, I'm not using it. So you carry your gels. So this is, you eat these things when you're running. About every 6 miles, you take one of these. They got caffeine in them. They're 100 calories. It gives you a little energy. It's not going to replenish everything, but it gives you a little. So what are you refueling with? Your water, your Gatorade. What's at the stops? And then what's your plan? You just don't, the gun goes off. No, what's your plan for the first mile, second mile, third mile? Where you want to be at 5 miles? Where do you want to be at halfway? With the new technology and your phone, and I run with music playing, but I can also get texts now. So I can get a text while I'm running, and I can answer while I'm running. So my nieces and nephews all knew I was running, and they would encourage me when I was running. They would, but I could also hear their conversations too. So I could, if they were just having a conversation, oh, he seems to be slowing down. Oh, he seems to be going faster. I could hear all that. My phone tells me what the text says. So, but in that, about 13 miles in Chicago, I said, I was a little bit behind my pace because I wear a wristband, and on my wristband, I print out at each mile where I want to be. What is the time? Okay. So at halfway, I knew I'm not too far off, but I'm behind. But I was starting to pick up the pace, and I sent a message to my Mary and my mom, and that hey, at 3:25 not out of reach. I'm still on track. So anyhow, so that's my first page here. So now you know way more than most everybody about a marathon. What did I tell you all this for? How does this relate to faith? How does this relate to our marathon, our race? What I talked about a little bit can apply to any long-term thing, anything that you want to accomplish that's big. Have a plan. It doesn't have to be a marathon. Even though it's after Thanksgiving, I'm not trying to turn you guys into runners and get ready for Christmas and all that stuff. Okay, so, but how does this relate to faith? with all your accolades on meeting my 3:25 and 48 seconds, I better keep track of my time. So how's this relate to merit? How's this relate to faith? So I've put in scriptures, and this was fun doing this because there's a lot of scriptures that do remind me of running and things to consider. And there is a lot of things. I think Paul was a runner because he talks about running in lots of his in quotes and in the Bible throughout the Bible. There's lots of analogies to running. So faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11:1. That to me is that's faith. And when you get ready for a marathon, you got 18 weeks ahead of you. A lot can happen, a lot of challenges. So in your marathon, there's a lot of challenges that can come up, but you have to have that belief, that faith. All right? So not only in a marathon, but any major accomplishment, any achievement takes time. You're going to have challenges. The path's not going to be what you intended. You're going to hit those potholes. So you have to have that faith. And I think preparing for a marathon, that faith, like you had said, and that's why I laughed, because it's hit me. It's hit me before, but you brought that up. So, how else? So have a plan. Start training. Again, I'm not talking marathons. I'm talking your walk. Your walk with Christ. You're gonna grow, and there's going to be challenges. So, some other quotes. This is from Matthew 6:32-33. Do not worry about your physical well-being. People who don't know any better run after all the things they want, but your heavenly Father knows your needs. Run for his kingdom and his righteousness, then everything that you need will be taken care of. How about some marathons that we know about? Melchizedek's. What do you think their marathon's like? Honduras. That's a marathon. Shumela, Pakistan. What do you think about that marathon? That's their marathon. Training for marathon only takes 4 months. Sounds like a long time. Your walk with Christ is going to be much longer than that. We need to be in shape for the battles and the obstacles that will come. So, training plans. What are you doing every day for your spiritual endurance? What are you doing to overcome those challenges? Your training plan consists of your daily devotion and prayer. That's your speed work. Your regular praise and worship. That's your strength training. Reading the Bible regularly. Those are your tempo runs. Sunday school and pastor's message. Long runs. Those are your long runs for endurance. I talked about this before when I was joking about my training buddies and the glass jar that they sent. But we're all training buddies. Everybody in this room is your training buddy. It's accountability. Being accountable to when I have training buddies that I run with at work. We go out at lunchtime. I have training buddies in Seneca Falls I do long runs with. I'll text them, what are you guys doing today? Sometimes they're not training for a marathon and I am. So they'll run, I'm doing a 16 miler. Well, they're not ready to do a 16 miler, but they'll do the first 6 with me. And then the other guy might do the final 6 with me. But that's accountability. We're all accountable to each other. We're all training buddies. Everybody in this room, we're all our training buddies. So be accountable to each other. All right. How am I doing on time? Not too bad. I don't know if I'll be within 48 seconds, but I'm not doing too bad. All right. So, what will your training do for you? Your training's going to build your endurance and your perseverance. It's going to prepare you for the obstacles and tackle the challenges that life's going to throw at you, because life's going to throw obstacles and challenges in your way. Everything's not going to be smooth with your walk. You're going to have health issues. You're going to have family with health issues. You're going to have potholes that hit you. You're going to have kid issues. You're going to have timing challenges. You're going to have scheduling challenges, jobs. You name it. There's going to be things that come up. And you need to be ready for those. So you need to have that endurance. Your training is going to be preparing you for those challenges. Training can be boring. 18 weeks is a long time for a marathon. On Wednesday afternoon, when the weather's awful, but you know you have that run, you don't want to do it, but you do it. You put your stuff on, and the best thing you can do is push the front door. Once you push the front door and you press the start button, you're running. And sometimes those are the best runs and the best time and training you've had. So when you don't feel like it, listen to that podcast. Pick up your training manual. Okay? So, what's your prize for your race? I'm 58 now. I don't win races. I did when I was younger. I won some. I still win my age group once in a while, which is cool. But now I get these. That's about all I get. I don't know what you get, Bill, for winning the race. You probably get a nicer trophy than this, but this is about it. But you know, the prize isn't this. This is, I don't know, probably, I've organized races before. It's probably about $1.50. All right, I've run 26.2 miles, and they put $1.50 medal on. It's cool, but not to minimize that. But it's not the medal, right? Your walk with Christ isn't going to be the medal. Your medal is spending the rest of eternity with Him. So the ultimate prize for our Christian walk is our salvation, and for our forever spending our time with our Father. Regarding training, I love this verse. This is probably one of my favorite verses, because we can get like this. Things are going well, maybe things aren't going well. Galatians 6:9, and let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. And when you're training, marathon, training for your next career move, training for your walk, don't grow weary while you're doing good. Second thing training is going to do is build mental toughness. You're going to have naysayers. Even marathon runners have naysayers. You don't drive around and see lots of people running out there. More people will say, "What are you doing?" There's this guy that I work with. He always said to me, "Why are you running? Someone chasing you?" Like he could not. And his daughter actually is a runner. But even he just could not really, what are you doing? What's the point of this? So you're going to have naysayers out there. You need to know where you're headed. And you need to know who's leading you and also running by your side. So again, who's leading you? I hope we all know. Who's by your side? Who are your running buddies? The world's not on your side. We're all on your side. He's leading us. So you build that mental toughness. That training is going to do that. That daily devotional, that daily praise and worship, that daily podcast, that daily reading the scripture, Sunday school, pastor's message. So another quote from Galatians: "You were running a good race. Who cut in on you and kept you from obeying the truth? That persuasion does not come from the one who calls you." Those are the outside influences. That's Satan during your walk. That's the friend saying, "What are you running for? Someone chasing you?" Okay? So your training will prepare you to strengthen your mind for those challenges. In the marathon, there's a lot of time. 3.5 hours is a lot of time. There's a lot of things that will go through your head in 3.5 hours. Some good, some not good. When you're behind your time, when I look at my wrist and I look at the printout that I made for the band that I made, and I'm going, okay, I'm 2 minutes off. I'm only 3 miles in. You can go this way with your thoughts, or you can go that way with your thoughts. Okay? So, building that mental toughness comes from the daily grind, the speed work, the tempo runs, knowing that you're okay, you're on track. 1 mile doesn't cause you to go off the rails. Okay? So, you need to condition your mind to overcome the chirping and the obstacles, the potholes. So, 1 Corinthians 10:13. "No testing has overtaken you that is not common to everyone. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tested beyond your strength. But with the testing, he will also provide the way out so that you may be able to endure it." Finally, overcoming challenges. How are you dealing with them? As we talked about, there's going to be hurdles. There's going to be obstacles put in your path. Some you created, most somebody else created, or something created. As I said, the world is not for you. The devil is not for you. In your walk, that's the last thing he wants. So there's going to be hurdles and obstacles in your path. The illnesses, getting a cold. She can attest to this. That last week before the marathon. 3 weeks? So, I stand corrected. So she's lived it lots of times. She's lived every marathon that I've run. The last couple weeks, you've done 15 weeks, 16 weeks. It's called your taper now. You've done your long runs. Nothing you do the last week is going to make you run better. But you catch a cold. Especially with coronavirus around. When we were in Chicago, I probably thought I had coronavirus about 18 times in the last 24 hours before the race. Your mind starts thinking of, oh, I think my throat's sore. Oh. So, you have these battles. So you have to build that mental toughness and to get over those challenges. So every marathon I've run, I've had some type of challenge. Talked about the knee. New York, my first New York was awful. It was my worst marathon ever. I got a cold, really, and this time it was real. I got a really bad cold that week, and nasal, that was not good. But I also knew myself enough that we picked out a location that I would meet my parents and my Mary and the kids and so on, nieces. I had a whole bunch of people come down. And about mile 17, I knew, even though my pace was okay, on mile 17, I said, this is not the day. So you got to know yourself. So, getting close to wrapping up here. So, overcoming those challenges. And again, another verse that I lean on a lot, and I hope you do too, because we're all going to face them. This is from James 1, 2 through 4. And count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Without the daily training, and again, going back to your speed work being your daily praise and worship, your daily devotion, your long runs being in Sunday school and listening to the pastor's message and then applying that. That's preparing you for those obstacles. So count it all joy. Those obstacles are in your way for a reason. They don't feel like it at the time. My knee injury that I had to deal with the last 10 weeks of training, looking back, probably kept me from overtraining. Because that's one thing you can do. You can overtrain. You can get too zealous because things are going so well. So looking back, that knee injury, I'm still battling with it now, but it was tough. I had to take days off. I had to modify my plan. So be flexible. Be ready to modify your plan. Finally, the last thing is, and I capitalize this for a reason, run your race. Don't run somebody else's race. Run your race. I mentioned before, I'm 58 years old now. I knew going in, I'm not going to win the race. But the race I want to win is this race, my race. I said 3:25. 3:25:48. That was my race. I was happy as a clam. That was great. I've had other times where I said 3:25 and I ran a 3:37. Doesn't sound like a lot, but for a marathoner, Bill, that's like you being 0.2 off what you wanted to be, right? You're upset. So, run your race. To do that, you got to know yourself. What are your strengths? What are your limits? What are your gifts? Who are you? What is your race? The Melchizedeks have their race. They have their marathon. Shamela has her marathon. Honduras, the Greens have their marathon. What's your marathon? So, and then stick to your plan, stick to your goal, but be ready to adjust when things don't go right. I talked about New York. The first marathon it was actually my second marathon, but it was my first marathon to try to qualify for Boston. See, Boston, they don't just let in anybody, you have to qualify. And it's based on your age. At the time, I had to run a 3 hour and 15-minute marathon to qualify. I picked out Vermont City, Vermont. Wow, May, should be nice and cool. The last temperature I remember them announcing was when I was about a mile from the finish line, and they said, well, we've just hit 78 degrees. It was hot. And I had done something stupid that time. I remember when I said don't do anything on race day that you haven't done before? I wore thicker socks because I thought it'd be nice and padded. Well, it got hot that day. Your foot can grow about 2 sizes during the race. So I lost 6 toenails after that race, and I was in the medical tent, and Mary was wondering where I was. But I had to modify my time because I was shooting to break 3 hours. I was young then, foolish. So I was shooting to break 3 hours. I never broke 3 hours. I was shooting to break 3 hours. But that day, about 10 miles in, I knew that if I kept going at this pace, I wasn't going to finish. And my goal was to qualify for Boston. That was the number one goal. The number two goal was to break 3 hours. I knew if I kept going at this pace, me and this other guy were running, and at the pace that we were going at, there's no way I'm going to finish 26 miles at this pace. So I had to dial it back. But I had to know myself and what was my main objective. So know yourself. So I'm wrapping up here. Two last quotes or verses. This one's a little bit long, but I love it. This is from Corinthians 9:24-25. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. So, hopefully you've kind of gleaned my analogies and pulled it together. So hopefully through this and through your walk, I think about my dad. I know he was able to say, I've fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. My blessing to you is you can do the same. Amen.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Put on your running shoes.